so delighted that you're here. You really honor us by being here.
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. You got to start with some energy, right? Because otherwise everybody's not awake.
That's right. Yeah, we like to get going. So yes, put down that sleepy time tea, everybody.
That's right.
That's for later. So let me just start with your professional journey. So your career included, as I've said, leadership roles at a number of organizations in the sector. Could you share with us what drew you to the better for you food and beverage space, and specifically to your leadership role at Hain Celestial?
Absolutely. Well, I actually, in the family joke, is that we started in food. Actually, I grew up in food. My father was in the meat industry. He was at a company that was acquired by Tyson Foods. And my mother ran a gourmet cooking business as I was growing up. So I grew up with food was a big part of our lives. And all of the most important family moments were around the table. You know, if you're sad, food. If you're upset, food. If you're going to celebrate, food. And so it was always sort of in the mix. My first job was walking soybean fields and detasseling corn in the cornfields of Iowa. And that, as I moved into Tyson, really you saw sort of the move from agribusiness into processed foods. And it got me very interested in the connection between the rural environment and what shows up on your table, and how do you sort of demystify it. I did not intend to be in the food industry. I went to school with the intent of going to law school. But my father paid for undergrad, informed me that grad school would be on me. I realized I had no money, and I had interned at Tyson when I was in college, so they offered me a position in sales that I thought would be a couple of years, and then I'd go on and have my stellar legal career. And I have since told John Tyson that he ruined my stellar legal career, but I stayed at Tyson 17 years and had a number of roles that were in sales, marketing, operations, and an opportunity to run some of our global businesses. Went from Tyson, very much growing your food and processing it, to McCormick, which is sort of what I described as the Intel chip inside great foods and brands. And in fact, the PepsiCo relationship reported into my business unit. McCormick does most of the cola vanilla that goes in the beverages, and did most of the seasonings that went on the outside. I was claim to fame. I was there when we brought Doritos Locos Tacos to life. But I had the chance to run the U.S. and Latin America for McCormick, and I loved understanding the science behind food and how you can mimic things like fatty mouthfeel but not have dairy actually in the product, so that you give the consumer the experience of great tasting food backed by great brands. But I didn't have brands. I was the Intel chip inside. So when Kellogg's came calling, it was sort of the best of all worlds. And it was a chance for me to work on some of the world's most iconic brands that are beloved. They're now two companies, but at the time they were one company. And my business was across North America, what I described as the miscellaneous drawer in the kitchen within Kellogg's. It was all of the side businesses that we owned. We, you may not know, did all of the Girl Scout cookies and actually owned the Girl Scout cookie brands, and that was a separate business. And then we did a lot of restaurant activity. So we put our brands in partnership with restaurant chains, and then everything that was on the go. So convenience stores, schools, hospitals, airports, sort of anywhere. My goal with our board, I always said, I want when somebody is hungry, before their stomach actually rumbles, they just have to reach out 18 inches and there's a product right there. But it was this goal of putting our brands within arm's reach of the consumer. Didn't intend on leaving Kellogg's, had a wonderful run there, and Glanbia called. And I had worked in a variety of environments where I had global in parts of my business. And I'd worked in ingredient space with McCormick, but I'd also worked in brand, and Glanbia was looking for somebody to be the president of the Americas business. If you don't know Glanbia, they're actually the leader in performance nutrition. So brands like Optimum Nutrition, Gold Standard Whey, if you work out, you would know that brand, and brands like Slim Fast or Think Bars. They acquired 9 companies but had never integrated them. And for me, it was the culmination of everything I'd done in my career to that point, but on a global scale because the company's based in Ireland. So it was a chance for me to integrate the brands, integrate the business, build the route to market, work with wonderful people like Sharon, who was at Vitamin Shop at the time. And it was a different part of the industries, and I am, what I have learned, a very curious learner. The worst thing that can happen for my team is Wendy gets bored. Because when I get bored, I tinker, and you want me to tinker in a productive way. So Glanbia gave me a chance to really tinker, and I didn't intend on leaving, but I got the call for Hain, and I have to say, it felt like all of my companies, all the categories, and all the experiences come together in one bucket. I've led transformation at multiple of those companies. I had done commercial integration. I had done M&A integration and divestiture. I had worked across global geographies, but this would be me in the top seat and a chance to truly transform a company from sort of end to end. But it's also a company that is pure play better for you. I had been at companies like Kellogg's, and no offense to my colleagues, and I am a proud alum of Kellogg's, but we had better for you as a vertical. You know, we had a little bit of Kashi and a little bit of Bare Naked and a little bit of Special K that allowed you to then have all of the more indulgent products in the portfolio. What I learned when I was at Glanbia is this connection between gut health and food as fuel. There is something real in gut health and what you put in your body and the impact it has on longevity and health and energy. And Hain is that, a pure play company. Everything we do is intended to be better for you. We lead in natural and organic. We have no artificial colors and flavors in our products. I think I said last week to somebody, we were no red dye before no red dye was cool. And our goal isn't to be a healthy company, because what consumers have told us is, look, I'm not looking for you to purely tell me only eat, bark. But if I don't want to sacrifice taste and I don't want to sacrifice convenience, and you shouldn't have to sacrifice availability and affordability, how do we create foods that are delicious and good for you? And I think that's the sweet spot where we are. And I'm excited to be at a company whose purpose is really grounded in that, and that really guides everything that we do. So I think I started in food growing, and eventually I've moved my way all the way through, but food has been the common thread.
What a great background, a great story. I do love that you've avoided the bark, but that you've also spent some time on Doritos Locos Tacos, which is something that we all share a love for. I especially like the way that you described the progression of your career. One of the things that I think we do when we see people like you, really senior, successful business executives, we assume there's some sort of predestination or taken for grantedness, that when you were sitting in the seat that some of our students are and you looked up at your equivalent, you thought, oh, that's going to be me. But I know I'm starting to learn from talking to people like you that isn't the case, that there's lots of twists and turns along the way. When you were, say you were a senior at Luther College, did you ever imagine that you would be a CEO of a multinational company?
No. To be honest, my favorite class at Luther was constitutional law. I viewed I was going to go set precedent. That's what I wanted to do. I was really excited to be able to do that. But what I've since learned is that, and I actually had a colleague who said, Wendy, I've known you your whole career. And every company you've been at, you've driven innovation and change and new business models. You're not someone that's going to help follow precedent. You will help set precedent. So you should be in places where you help shape things, and then let your general counsel be the one that makes sure that it's legal for you to do so. But I went to, so it's a small liberal arts college, Luther is, and I had an amazing experience there. But what I would say, and my father told me this when I was going to school, I'm not sending you for vocational training. I'm sending you to get an education. Learn how to learn. And it was very much focused on taking complex issues and looking at them from all sides, looking at them from science, from culture, from history, from literature, because you have to fully understand something, you have to actually see it from all the angles and be a lifetime learner. But you also have to learn in community. And I think actually Neeley does a great job of this. When Anders was here, he really enjoyed the project work that he did with others, because the rest of our lives we're going to be doing work with others. So I loved the constant curiosity of learning, but I had a pivotal moment while I was at school. I studied abroad in London for a J term in the Gulf War. So this will really date me, and there's probably people in here who are like, Gulf War, was there a Gulf War? When was that? Spoiler alert, it was 32 years ago, but we were going over literally right after the incidents had started. And our professors said, don't call out that you're American. So guided us on what to wear, and no baseball caps and no flags, because you made yourself a target, especially some of the bombings in the tube stations. Yeah. That experience during that month was the first time I saw the U.S. from an outside perspective, and having that worldview made it easier for me to think about how do you do business globally. I was also in class with people from all around the world, and looking at the conversations we had, especially in this case, it was about the history of theater, but you saw theatrical stories from Shakespeare, but from all aspects, and they were more relevant than we thought. So you think it's an old text, but it's actually quite relevant. But that idea of the world is smaller than you think it is, we're a lot more alike than we think than we think we are, and it made the world less scary. So when I went to Tyson, I was there, I think 3 years before I moved into the global McDonald's business unit. And I was running sales and marketing for that group. And then when they asked me a year later to take over that business, I was quite young. I wasn't even 30 yet. And the business was, at the time, about $650 million of sales for Tyson, with operations in Mexico, in the US, but we had a very big business in Japan. We were actually the primary supplier of chicken to Japan. Here I was, this little girl from Iowa, now suddenly with this business. But I looked back on my experience at Luther and thought, okay, so I know how to build connections. I know how to ask the questions. I know how to be curious to explore this. I'll figure this out as I go. So long way of answering your question. I didn't really view myself in this place, but what I did learn was do more of the things that you're interested in and you're curious about. Do less of the stuff that you're not. And I think God has a plan, and he will put you on the path where you are meant to be. I wasn't meant to be a lawyer, but I didn't know it. But I was meant to look at things with that kind of mindset, to look at it from all sides, and that has played out well for me in business. There is no one answer to any question. There's no right answer to any question, and I will get far more accomplished through and with my team than if I felt like I was the smartest person in the room and start doling out the lists of to-dos, and here are all of the answers from the great on high. I will never be the one that has all the answers, and I shouldn't. But I learned how to engage with others to get to the right answers.
That's a really compelling story. I like how it touches on your leadership style, how it touches on your history, how you've got to this point. I wonder if I could move slightly to something that you've started to touch on, which is maybe the combination of leadership and the global component. Hain Celestial is a global firm. I believe you operate across North America, Europe, Asia, the Middle East. And I know that you've worked very hard to sort of drive the organization as a globally integrated enterprise. How do you think of how your leadership style has evolved to lead teams across these diverse regions? Could you maybe give us an example of how you adapt your approach to accommodate some of the many differences that we do see across the regions?
Yeah, so let me start with a little bit of history. You mentioned Hain's been around 30 years, all through acquisition, 62 acquisitions, almost none of them integrated. And that works until it doesn't work. Okay. And so when my predecessor was actually brought in by an activist on the board, and they did a series of 4 or 5 years of pretty deep divestitures to really clean up the portfolio and get it down to what I would call a fighting core. Okay. But when I joined the company, there were still questions like, your business is really complex, you're in these 30 plus brands, do they have synergies, can you scale? Like, this seems like a lot. And it was a lot, but not a lot to run, but we made ourselves complex for no reason. Okay. And I am the person who will take a lot of disparate points and try to boil them down to the critical few. That's how I sort of look at the world. Business is no different. Take your business on in the whole and boil it down to the critical few things. What are the most important elements of the business? What are the most important geographies? What are the most important things we have to get right? And those were the things that we set about doing. But it was also curious to me that some of my executive team had actually never met one another. Now, they were all over the world, but they technically did business together, but they'd actually never spoken.
Wow.
We actually weren't even on the same Microsoft platform, so they couldn't even video call, and they didn't have the same email. So we might as well have been 15 different companies. So we actually got very intentional about how we would bring things together, and I do believe culture starts at the top. We know culture is how people think, feel, and act. I wanted people to think, feel, and act in unison. Didn't mean that they weren't going to bring individual thoughts, but I needed us to have one common purpose as a company that would guide our decision making. I needed to have a common set of values that people could be anchored in, and I needed to make sure that people knew each other so that, when things go wrong, because, spoiler alert, things go wrong, you need to be able to pick up the phone, and I didn't want it to be my phone. All the questions shouldn't come to the CEO, but they had to wire this way. So we actually brought in an outside coach who actually was my coach at both the Kellogg's transformation, and I also brought him into Glambia. So I call him my emotional support animal, but brought him in to actually help my team come together. It also helped me assess who are the people that can get us there, and who are the people that maybe got us to this point, but they're not the people that we should go forward with. I've never regretted a people decision I made. I've regretted how long I took. And so I now try to make those calls pretty quick, because for somebody who can't get it done, they are constantly worrying. And for the ones who are rock stars, they feel constantly held back. So that if you can unlock the potential of the organization, you're moving in unison regardless of what's happening. So we did a lot of work around culture, mission, vision, and values. We aligned on strategy. We brought Bain & Company in to really help us frame out where to play, how to win choices. And then we got pretty aggressive on divestitures, geographic divestitures, brand and category divestitures that we knew weren't going to be in the future, so we could free up the core. And then I needed to figure out, how do we leverage this global model? We have about 50% of our business is international. We have a headquarter in Vienna, Austria, multiple production locations in Germany and Austria and Belgium. We have a headquarters in London. We have a beautiful headquarters in Cambridge. We have another location in Dublin, and operations all around the UK. In the US or in North America, we're in Toronto. Great, beautiful location in Vancouver. Our Celestial Seasonings tea blending operation, and it is in the top 3 tourist destinations in Boulder. So if you happen to find yourself there, you can meet Sleepy Time Bear and see how the blends are made. I would be remiss if I didn't advertise that, but so we have a big location in Boulder, and then obviously Northwest Arkansas for Walmart. And then we built our global hub in Hoboken, New Jersey. I was telling you earlier that about a month before I was named into the role, the board informed me, oh, by the way, we've sold the headquarters on Long Island, but we haven't told anybody yet, because we wanted you to get to choose. And I said, well, that's lovely. And they said, well, we'll tell everybody. No, please don't tell them, because the worst thing you can say is we're selling the headquarters and we're bringing in a new CEO in the middle of the fiscal year. People would be in panic. So I said, just name me and I will take this. And so I think my 3rd day in, we did a global town hall, and I was doing sort of intro. And then I said, so I have news. I know where we're moving from and when we're moving out, but I don't know where we're moving to or when we're moving in. But this is a team sport, and we're going to figure it out. And we actually looked all across the U.S. Everybody provided criteria. We really made it a company-wide. And I think it was the first example I wanted people to sense of, I wasn't going to lead the way they were used to. This was going to be a culture that we shaped together. The decisions that matter to people and where and how they live and work would matter. And that we were going to intentionally leverage our hubs. I think we learned a lot in COVID. Many companies had record earnings in those years, and people weren't physically in the office. So I wanted to use this as a way to reinforce our mission and purpose. Because I think healthier living is what you put in and on your body, but it's also how you live and work. So how do we demonstrate this in how we show up? So we launched what we call our agile work model. We leverage the hubs, and we bring people together for what we call moments that matter. So if you're located near one of the hubs, come in intentionally for moments that matter. Moments to ideate, to collaborate, or to celebrate. But if you have work that you're doing with the team in Vienna, you coming into the office to sit behind a closed door on a screen talking to the people in Vienna makes absolutely no sense. So we got very intentional. We made it policy. We rolled it out. Applications are up 500% since we did that about a year and a half ago. Our engagement scores are up 8 percentage points. Our retention is below industry average. And I think the most important thing for me is we have hired some amazing talent who would have never come to Hain because I would have made them move. And because I haven't made them move and just said, do you have a passport? Are you on the TSA watch list? Because that's going to be a problem. Do you have a suitcase that you feel good about? And then if you do, then we're all good. So we've saved money, we've recruited better talent, we've engaged the culture, and we've lived out our purpose. And those were things that were really important to me. Because let's face it, anybody, if you look at our financials, you'd know we're in a turnaround. I knew that going into the company, and turnarounds take on average about 21 months. And we are about 18 months into that journey. Turnarounds are not for the faint of heart, and it takes time and energy. And I run fast, like not in the marathon, did not run fast. Just don't die at the end, that was my goal. But I burn at a high rev, and I'm really curious. I need people who will move with me. If they're people who need me to kind of nudge them along, they're probably not good for a turnaround, and they're certainly not going to be good sitting on my team because I don't have the patience for that. But boy, if you run fast, we are changing things, we are tinkering, we are making some things happen that I think are really going to position the company for some amazing things in the future.
I like the way that you've turned sort of what could be an extreme disruption in location into opportunities there. We haven't announced this yet, but we're actually moving out of Fort Worth as TCU.
You know where you're moving from.
We don't know where.
And when, but just not where to.
Exactly.
I like it.
We haven't figured
Can
that
I
out
recommend
yet.
Hoboken?
Hoboken, yep. We were thinking of Hoboken. It won't be Dallas, I promise. No, we're here, University for Fort Worth. I wonder if you could talk, just brief, you've started to touch on strategy. I think a lot of us would be really interested to hear how you think about this what could be seen as a disparate brand portfolio. And you've got 39 brands. In one sense, that's 39 business units, but Hain Celestial is one company. How do you think about, so growth through acquisition has been a key part of the way that you've developed. I think you're moving toward I think you call it the Hain Reimagined strategy. How do you think about that, the synergies that exist, what's consistent across those brands, maybe the different groups that exist, so that the way that your suppliers, your employees, your executives can think about this not just as 39 individual groups, but maybe one or a small number of superordinate groups?
And I think any company that's been built through acquisition, there is a natural tendency to think that what made each one of those brands special was its complete and separate identity.
Right.
The reality, and I think my experience at Kellogg's was enormously helpful. Kellogg's actually has in the portfolio, pre-split, more brands than I have in my portfolio. But the way that we ran the business was very clear around categories. And so in a category, cereal, you might have 12 brands that sit in there, but you think about the cereal business and then each brand has uniqueness underneath it. So we actually worked to simplify our business. What are the businesses that we are in? We're in 5 categories. And they are all better for you. Better for you snacking, better for you baby and kids, better for you beverages, better for you meal preparation or pantry items, and then better for you personal care, which we actually just announced this week. We're in the process of divesting of the personal care, so we will be a pure play food and beverage company, all in better for you. Once you start to talk about that, it's, well, there are 4 categories, and then we could dimensionalize those, and then we could look for the synergies amongst those. And we're only in 2 regions, so our separate reportable segments are the North America business, and then international is together. International, we had bits and bobs all over the place in international, a little JV in this market and a JV over here my family eats more than we sold in those markets. And so we said, let's also clean out what matters. So businesses have to be at a certain materiality. They have to actually contribute to the entire organization and be a part of the growth plan. And then anything outside of that, we divested. We moved out of JVs in non-core markets. We consolidated operations, distribution centers. We did a lot of what I call cleanup in aisle 3. So we did a whole bunch of cleanup in aisle 3. And then we started to look at, because anytime you bring together companies, you're looking for the 3 things that you want to get from bringing any companies together. You want to see scale. You want to see, can they scale? Are there synergies? And do they provide some element of diversification so that you have sort of a yin yang and you can consistently deliver results regardless of what's going on in a particular market? We're actually, I think, in the right geographies, because let's face it, when Europe is down, the US is up. When the US is down, Europe tends to be up. So we're sort of, we've got a natural hedge in our business. We had almost no synergies because the team never looked for them, because they looked where the obvious ones are. Are they all ambient products, so all shelf stable? Are they all produced in the same plant? I mean, the most basic. We actually challenged the team to come back to, are they sold in the same locations? Because I can have a Walmart team managing multiple parts of the Walmart business, and I now have a bigger scale relationship with them across Better For You. We also found a lot of scale in our back office. When we started to look at our global procurement spend, for instance, 50% of our spend was truly global raw materials, packaging, in some cases the same suppliers. And fun fact, we had 5 or 6 different contracts with those suppliers with different terms and different prices. So we weren't leveraging our own synergies and scale to the benefit of the organization. And that just allows you to unlock a lot of just wasted time and resources, so then you can get maniacally focused on where you're going to win. And then I had some brands that really didn't need to be in the portfolio. Our snack portfolio I feel very good about. Garden Veggie is a leading Better For You snack that now has, no offense to my Pepsi friends, but a really amazing Better For You tortilla chip under Flavor Burst, so please try them. But Garden Veggie, Garden of Eatin', which is organic, and then Terra Chips, which is, I think when I did a Squawk Box interview, the reporter said, I have to tell you, Terra Chips with hummus is a legit good snack. So we now use that little tagline internally, it's a legit good snack. So we have a core in salty snack. In baby and kids, we have the 2 leading baby and kids brands from birth to backpack. Ella's Kitchen is the #1 brand in the UK, which you'd be very familiar with from the before, and then Earth's Best here in the US. In our beverage brand, Celestial Seasonings Tea is an amazing brand, leader in herbal tea. And in Europe, we're actually the leader in non-dairy beverages. Very clean oat-based, plant-based milks and beverages. We do a lot in barista milks. And the most amazing, if you find yourself in Germany, we make the most amazing whipping cream that is, we sell to restaurants under the Natumi brand. Meal prep, we have Greek Gods yogurt. It's a leading Greek yogurt that really has amazing flavor profile and sort of a cult following. So there's these wonderful gems in the portfolio that we feel like give us an opportunity to really lean into. And bringing the company together forced us to learn how to talk about ourselves, so we were simple. Learn how to run the business, so it's much more simple. And you can see the outliers. Here's what's working, not working. You can very quickly fix it. If it's 39 businesses, you're all over the place all the time. It's whack-a-mole. We also have learned where we believe we have incremental scale, distort your resources there. Where can we leverage across the portfolio? Last summer is the first time we ever did a combined snack promotion. We did a Savor Your Summer snacking promotion, which had a fantastic response, especially in convenience stores, because for the most part, they don't have a lot of Better For You snacks in convenience stores. So it allowed us to be distinctive and unique, but multi-branded. And those are things that we think are opportunities. I got asked by one of the sell-side analysts when I first joined the company, Wendy, do you think you can really compete your portfolio? Because you're bigger than founder-led brands, but you're smaller than the big ones. So will you get squeezed in the middle? And I said, well, actually, I think that's the challenge for us, is how do we out-big the small with scale capabilities and what good looks like? Because Pepsi is a great CPG company. And I have lots of people I've hired from Pepsi because you bring great insights of what good looks like. But I want people who've also worked in small company environments like the founder, because you know how to get things done with speed and agility and take advantage of white space. So how you get the best of both, We talk about it as how can I have big CPG muscle and small CPG hustle? So how do you move with that kind of speed and agility? And it does mean I've had to hire for that. I can't hire people who've only worked in big CPG because they feel resource constrained. And I can't hire people who've only worked in a startup because they don't know how to do things process orientation. I really need people who can do both. And that's been sort of the intentional, how do you bring together a global enterprise that will drive greater value together than its parts? But it's been a really intentional journey to get there.
So you may not have gone into law, but I'm glad that you went into marketing, because as you talk, I want to eat more. I feel like some of the stuff that's at the table, other things as well. Yeah.
Oh, I will send you a whole care package, my friend.
See how easy that was, you were asking. Really grateful for you're helping us understand how you think about sort of the systematic links across and within those brands. Let's just move now to a couple of questions from the audience. There's a few questions related to the issue of culture. I'd love to talk a little bit about this, or hear a little bit about how you think about culture. I know this is very central to your management style, your leadership style. And this particular question, I think, would resonate with a lot of people within your organization as well. It's very simple. How do you maintain a culture in a turnaround?
Culture, as I said before, culture is how people think, feel, and act. And when you're going through a turnaround, you have to keep in mind that people are going to have a lot of feelings and a lot of wringing of the pearls while they worry about whatever's being decided at the top level of the organization. I am, probably to a fault for my team, openly transparent, up, down, and across the organization. And I really like feedback. I am a glutton for punishment, so I read every verbatim question and comment that comes in on our surveys. We do one after every global town hall. I read all of those as well. Then I curl up in the corner, and then I go back to work. But they tell me themes of how people are really feeling. We started, when I joined the company, a series of what we call T-Talks, CEO T-Talks. And the T-Talks are 10 random people across the organization. And it's an open forum. They can ask me anything. Some things I may say, because we started them all on Zoom, some we do in person. And I will say, look, if there's something, we're in our quiet period and I can't answer it, I promise you I will put it aside. And as soon as we're past earnings, I will come back to you and I will answer it. But there's some things I won't be able to say in the interim. But what I've found is not only do I get great insights from people, but it has created its own subculture. Because you do the first one and people talk to each other about, did you get invited to this? Why did I get invited? What do you think she's going to say? What do you think it's going to mean? Am I losing my job? And then the people who went to it afterwards get asked, and they're like, well, actually, she didn't even have an agenda. I mean, she just asked questions, and then she just listened. She didn't even say something. And then they carry their own life of their own. So the coach that we brought into Kellogg's Glanbia, and who's now at Hain, talks a lot about the sort of outcomes of your business are the result of the actions that people take. People take actions because of their beliefs. They believe what is possible. They believe what you would support. They believe if I take this risk, they're gonna back me up or I'm gonna lose my job. Like all of that plays in people's thinking. So ultimately, if I want people to have a different belief, I need to create experiences that will shape that belief. And those experiences are celebrate, not wildly celebrate, but celebrate the easy failures. What did we learn from it? What would we do different? Celebrate the risk taking so that we talk about, hey, guess what? Somebody put this together and this is what it's doing for us. Open forums when people are anxious, and I will walk them through what's on my mind. We do clearly an open Q&A at every town hall, which actually Jen, who runs our communications, gets a lot of feedback from other companies. Your CEO does open Q&A. Anyone could ask anything. And she said that's important to her. And I've done it at Kellogg's, I did it at Glanbia, and I do it here. Because I do want people to feel like they could tell me anything. Because here's what I have found, and I learned this at Kellogg's. Information comes into the organization at the bottom level as a cornflake. By the time it gets to the top of the organization, it's a frosted flake. And if I really want to fix what's broken in the company, I need to, like in our case, maybe it comes in as a straw, it gets to the top, and it's a heavily seasoned straw. Maybe I should do that. But I need people to give me the unfiltered view of what needs to get fixed. And then I need to be the one that can tell them, well, what have you considered? What are you going to do about it? How can I support? Because I also don't want them to come to me with all the problems to be the solution provider. I want them to come to me to inform me of what they're doing and how I can back it up. Because we've got to move decision-making farther down in the organization, or we will be limited by my capacity and my thinking, and that is very limiting. Yeah. I want to exponentially grow the power of the organization, and that means unlocking every part of the organization at any level.
I think that's really admirable, and so many firms would like to feel that they have a culture where there can be that open communication, but I think so few actually do it. And to be able to provide open Q&A, I mean, I can see why your comms people are nervous, but you're clearly good about it. I love all of your terms. I mean, maybe everybody is seeing this, but I was writing all of these down, the corn flake to the frosted flake, and I'm going to have to steal some of these things. These are great. Maybe time for one more. I liked this question. When you've got big picture ideas and goals that you're focusing on, how do you take it day by day? How do you instantiate what is maybe a 10-year vision to what you should do today and what you should do this week?
Yeah, the best advice I got, it was actually a former CFO at Kellogg's, and I was leaving the company, I was going to the role at Glanbia, and I said, what's your advice for me? And I adore Amit, and he's a very thoughtful thinker, and he said, Wendy, in this role, you have to keep in mind, you have to deliver both the quarter and the decade. And you and only you can decide how to balance the organization's resources and focus that assures delivery of the absolute minimum in the quarter to get the absolute maximum in the decade. And everyone's looking to you for those choices. It doesn't mean you're doing the work, but it does mean you're making the broader choices. And when I moved into this role, I serve on the First Horizon, I think, has locations in Texas, and so I serve on the First Horizon board as well. And we have an amazing CEO there. And when Brian became CEO at First Horizon, it was right after the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. So he was clearly in a very challenging situation. And he was given this list from a mentor of his. So when I took this job, he said, I'm going to give you my same list. These are the 5 things that only a CEO can do. If you're doing anything outside these 5, you're taking away the good stuff from somebody on your team.
Can we have that list?
I will give you the list. But if you and you're doing it because you know how to do these things, and it's the muscle memory. And let's be honest, being at the top is really lonely. And there are days that are really, really hard, and you kind of want to just feel good. So it's the version of revenge shopping. I don't know, some people might be able to equate it. You have a bad day, I'm going to go shopping because it's going to make me feel better. It's the business equivalent of that. I'm having a bad day, I'm going to go make some decision that I know how to make because I need the win. But when you take the win at your level, you take away the win from somebody else. And it also means you're not focused on the hard stuff in that list of 5. And the list of 5, only I can help decide what culture we want to be. I can only decide what businesses we are in, but I also have to decide what businesses we aren't in. Only I can decide what kind of investments and resource decisions we will make at the company level from a balance sheet. Little investments are made in the business, but decisions about what to buy, what to sell, what to invest in for big long term, those have to be made. And I have to manage stakeholder engagement with investors and with the board in a way that takes the pressure off of my team. If I'm doing those things, I'm doing my job. I do anything outside those, I'm doing someone on my team's job, and it's either because they don't have the capability or I've not given them the ability. And if I'm doing that, I am robbing their development. It has helped me. In fact, I keep it on a little piece of paper inside the journal I carry with me. It reminds me on the really bad days, I do have to go there and go, okay, yeah, that's right. This is what my job is. Okay, I'll go do those things. Instead of calling the customer and saying, so, I heard we got some slots. I really wanted to talk about that because that would feel good. But the feel good for me is a steal good for somebody else.
I look forward to finding out what those 5 things are for a dean. I think I need to know
We
those.
can adapt the list together.
That'll be really
It'll be our
nice.
collaboration.
We've almost come to the end. Is there anything else that you want to share about the role, about Hain Celestial, something that we haven't covered that you think would be valuable for the audience to hear?
Clearly as a company, I'm incredibly proud of the company. It's the reason I went there. I'm proud of where we've been. I'm incredibly proud of where we're going, because at a time where I think consumers are looking for transparency in ingredients, authenticity in positioning for brands, and a company culture that will allow people to be able to balance the flexibility they want with the curiosity and contributions and influence they want to have, I think we're on to something, and I'm really excited about what that can be. I would tell you that so I'll speak to the students first, because my son graduated in 21. He went through a series of job rotations at a company and learned a ton, but he got exposed to a lot, which was great because he got exposed to the things I like to do and the things I don't like to do. That has put him farther along on his path. I would encourage you to not feel like you have to have this figured out right after you graduate. Mm-hmm. Nobody does. And if they tell you they do, they're lying to you. Or worse, they're on a path that may not be the intended path, and it'll be 15 years later, and they realize it is too late to make the lateral move that would allow them to have found the combination of aptitude, attitude, and passion and purpose. So I encourage you to go find ways to tinker, learn a lot, be curious, meet a lot of people. If you see an executive that you admire, boy, nothing makes me really feel better than when somebody walks up and says, I'd really just like to connect with you. I just want to run some ideas by you. I don't know a single executive that wouldn't want to be a mentor in the moment. So don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to reach out and make those connections. Make sure to nurture your network and do it authentically. If you go to an event and you spread your business cards out like you're dealing cards in Vegas, that's not an authentic connection. But if you really meet somebody and you have a genuine conversation and you want to carry it forward, then absolutely connect with them. But then follow up. You wouldn't believe the number of students. I hate to say this about Neeley. So I did a couple of C-level confidentials. Sorry, Ed. And I've met some amazing students through that who have stayed connected with me for the last, 7 years? But there were 2 or 3 that connected with me, never heard from them again until about 5 years later. And then they sent me a note on LinkedIn and said, I'm looking for a job and I see you have a job at your company. Probably not how you want to do it. But I did, by the way, connect them with the jobs, Ed. But make sure your connections are authentic and real, that you stay connected to people. Always lend a hand before you need a hand. Don't be the one that only reaches out to somebody when you're asking them to do something for you. And as a student, you have something to give. You have your experience, you have your perspectives, you have articles you've read, you have people that you've met, you have people in your network. Offer to lend something to someone so that when you need something, they remember, oh, yeah, he's a great thinker. He's always thinking about what I might be looking for. Or, boy, she's a great communicator. She keeps me up to date on things that she thinks I might be interested in. So don't forget that. For the business community that's in the room, I would encourage you to really figure out how to embrace flexibility in your work. Now, every job can't be done remote or hybrid. Like the people who produce our food, I guarantee you they're not doing it at their house. Those that are doing distribution, they are in the distribution centers with the boxes. They're not doing it in their garage and they don't drive it around in their car. But there are roles that we've learned. Find ways to encourage your teams to help you shape a culture for tomorrow and not just the cultures we're used to from the past. What I really learned in COVID is we fast adapted how people work because we had to, and we forced it on our teams. And they adapted very well, and they actually embraced it. And then when things got better, we're forcing them back into the model that we're comfortable with. So to do this requires you to lead differently, to manage differently, to think about work differently. Your HR teams need to think about how you integrate technology differently. When we launched Project Unity within Hain and put everybody on the same email platform, the same Microsoft platform, the teams in Europe talking to the teams in the US, and the richness of ideas that's coming out has been amazing. But there was no way that I was going to fly those teams back and forth every month. So there is a way to do it. So I would just encourage you to think differently, be curious, and find a way to really engage, especially youth, because that is the future of work, and they aren't going to want to work the way we grew up working, and so we have to find a way to adapt.
Well, thank you so much. You honor us by being here. This is a wonderful conversation. I know I speak for all of us when saying we see why Hain Celestial selected you to take this role. You're a really inspiring and a remarkable leader.
Thank you.
I want to thank you especially for humanizing the role. I think that we have learned more about you as a person, but how leaders think and how they deal with the difficult tasks that they face every day. So thank you so much. Please join with me in thanking Ms. Wendy Davidson.
Now, I'd be remiss, and my son would kill me, if you and I didn't do this for a picture.